When you think of China, just exactly what is it that you think about? Well, among other things, you may think about landscapes. You see, Chinese paintings have a tendency to have landscapes in them that are entirely unrealistic. No place on earth ought to have land formations like that. And yet, in South China, where we're going, they do. Most of these are in the area around Guilin, on the Li River. And the fact is that these mountains are caused mostly by the fact that they're very weathered limestone, and some of them have very peculiar shapes indeed.
This is a map of the provinces of China, but instead of the name of the province, this particular map happens to have the name of the country that has essentially the same population as that province. In this case, we're going to Hunan. Hunan has roughly the same population of the country of France. There are several different ways that you can get up into the mountains. We're going to be taking the cable car. It runs for over 5 miles, and it's widely said to be the longest cable car in the world. This ride happens to start actually in town. The town is Zhangjiajie. The road below us is said to have 99 turns in it. It leads up to a slightly different location in the mountains where Tiamen Cave is located. It's not really a cave, it's more like a natural bridge, but we'll be seeing it later. The peaks in this mountain range generally run from 3,000 to 4,000 feet in elevation. When you get to the top, there are sheer 1,000-foot drops everywhere that you look. The lady with the flag is Lisa, our guide. Our first objective at the top is what they call the Walk of Faith. They call it that because there's about a 60-yard stretch, about 200-foot stretch of the sidewalk there that is built into the side of a cliff, and that sidewalk is made out of glass. The result is you can see the sheer drop right below your feet. That house in the middle is basically where that glass sidewalk begins, and you can see it there slightly to the right of the house. That's the sheer drop. Now this is very much like what the American Indians did over the Grand Canyon. It's the same sort of structure for as far as I can tell. And frankly, if walking on this doesn't scare the bejesus out of you, I haven't the foggiest idea what's wrong with you. They hand out those little red booties to put over your shoes so that you don't scratch the glass. Now this really tests your faith in human engineering. Well, the end is near, but this next scene is more like what I came up here to see. Unfortunately, the weather here was too good while I was there. Fog would have helped this one considerably, because when there's fog at the base of those pinnacles, and there's someplace between 3,000 and 4,000 of them in this area depending on how you count them, it is entirely possible that those pinnacles look like they're floating on air. And that inspired some movie makers, in particular the folks that made Avatar. On the planet Pandora, there is a landscape that was largely inspired by these pinnacles. The Chinese were so enthused about the movie that they changed the names of some of the mountains in this area. Some of the areas are actually named after things that are supposed to be in Pandora. Pandora is a planet, and in that on that planet, they're supposed to have some topography which is very, very similar to a combination of this and what you can find in Venezuela. In the interior of Venezuela, there's a series of plateaus called tepuis, and those tepuis are where Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had his Lost World, complete with dinosaurs and such.
Gonna have to call it, guys. We're not allowed to run night ops. Colonel's orders.
The cartoon Kung Fu Panda also uses this same terrain as a background for some of its action. So these mountains have inspired a lot of artistic activity. Some of it, of course, the original Chinese painters, but in addition to that, the modern movie makers as well. But there's one more surprise that the Chinese have for you. There's an elevator going to the top of the mountains. You can take it up or down, of course, and either way, it's about 1,000 feet. So how did this place get to look the way that it does? Well, the answer is primarily water. Water withered away the limestone. So why doesn't all limestone formations look like this today? Well, the answer may very well be glaciers. This area never had them, never had the glaciers smoothing out the terrain like they do in most places. We're in what in China passes for the Grand Canyon. It's not as large as our Grand Canyon, but it is similar in many ways. It was cut by water, although it's a much smaller stream, and the depth of the cut isn't nearly as much. Nevertheless, it gives you a fair idea of what it was that weathered out that limestone into those formations. This is another view of that little river, but in this particular case, I've gone to extraordinary lengths to apply a certain amount of technology to see if I can get a different view. How do you think I did that? In this case, I used a quadcopter, a remote control aircraft, with a camera attached to the bottom of it. To save you a little time, we'll be going up a little bit faster than I did. There we are at the base of the cave, and you can see that there's a very long stairway that goes up to the top of the cave. That stairway has 999 steps in it. Apparently the contract read that there had to be less than 1,000 steps. That reminds me of a cartoon that I once saw.
Ah, my old enemy. Stairs.
Thanks for carrying me those last few flights. Okay.
Since the early days of flight, airplane pilots have wanted to go through very narrow, very small places. That's partly where the term barnstorming came about. And the pilots have decided that Tianmen Cave is a great place to do barnstorming. As a matter of fact, as many as 4 jets have gone through that cave at the same time. Now, they weren't going through wingtip to wingtip, but they were going through one right after the other. These are mostly Russian fighter jets, but there are also other kinds of aircraft that go through.
This aircraft is a simple one propeller job. Apparently, doing aerobatics as you're going through the donut is not a big problem. In fact, it looks like just about any number of aircraft could pass through the donut hole without too much trouble, as long as they're following one right after the other.
The formation teams are the last to thunder through.
In addition to the other aircraft that go through the Tianmen Cave, the natural bridge, there is also a lot of activity by guys wearing flying squirrel outfits. Now, I have heard about guys flying in flying squirrel outfits. I heard about a decade ago or so about somebody flying from England over to France across the Dover. And this is the first time, though, that I have actually seen videotape of people doing that kind of flying. And of course, one of the things that they're going to be interested in doing is flying around those gondolas. And another thing that they're going to be interested in doing is flying through the cave, through the natural bridge, just like the airplanes do.
I could always imagine how you could fly with an outfit like that, but I was always wondering how you would land. This at least answers that question. This guy is jumping with several different kinds of cameras. They're all the same maker, though. They're Hero GoPros, and he's got one on his helmet and one on his chest, and so he's being able to pick up a fairly wide variety of angles. Another thing that's important about that GoPro from my standpoint is that it's the same kind of camera that I used on my quadcopter. It's very versatile, rugged, and relatively cheap if something happens to it. Now you have no trouble telling where these people are at, because among other things you've got that serpentine road down below you, and off to the right there was Tianmen Cave. Another thing that you can tell is that they're flying near the cable cars. Indeed, they're flying too near the cable cars. Now this is apparently the secret ingredient that makes those flying squirrel outfits work. Now that's too close to those cable cars. You can always tell a happy flying squirrel because he's got bugs on his teeth. You know there's no reverse on this thing, so he's got to have it lined up just perfectly in order to be able to make this. Otherwise, he'll smash against the walls of the cave.
So now, how did those flying squirrels get those good pictures? Well, the way that they did it was with this. This little camera is called a Hero 2, and you can find people using it on Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, National Geographic. Sometimes they connect it to helmets, parts of machinery, long poles, things like that, anything that well, this camera is relatively cheap, so if something happens to it, it's no big deal. In addition to that, you can make this thing waterproof. It comes with its own waterproof case. All you got to do is stick it into the case like this, and there it goes. The control buttons are now on the outside of the waterproof case, and even if you're in scuba gear, you can operate this, or you can attach it to yourself. You can attach it to your helmet or a headband or to a wristband or something else. But nonetheless, this is what's taking those pictures. And it's extremely wide angle, which is why it doesn't have to be aimed. The fact of the matter is, the person that's shooting this video doesn't have to see what he's doing in order to probably get it, because it takes a look at almost everything. It's practically a fisheye is what it is.